You scroll past 100 photos a day. You barely register most of them. Then, one image stops your thumb completely. A hand pressed flat against a cave wall, painted 40,000 years ago, and for a second, something strange happens. You feel seen by a person who has been dead for longer than most civilizations have existed. But the real answer is far stranger. That hand on the wall wasn't decoration. It wasn't random. It was a message. And the mind that made it worked almost exactly like yours does right now. Deep inside the caves of Chauvet, France, painted roughly 36,000 years ago, are lions, horses, and rhinoceroses, rendered with a level of motion and shading that shouldn't be possible from people we once assumed were simple. The animals overlap. Their legs blur, as if caught mid-stride. Some art historians argue this wasn't accident. It looks like an early attempt at showing movement itself. Archaeologist Jean Klotz, one of the leading researchers on Chauvet, spent years studying these images up close. He noticed the artists didn't paint whatever was nearby. They chose specific animals in specific places, using the cave's natural bumps and curves to give the creatures depth. A bulge in the rock became a bison's shoulder. A crack became the line of a horse's back. This means someone stood in near total darkness, holding a flickering torch, and looked at blank rock the way you might look at a blank page. They saw potential in it. They saw a shape waiting to be finished. That is not a primitive act. That is imagination. For decades, the assumption was that early cave art existed for some clear, practical purpose. Maybe it was religious. Maybe it was tied to hunting rituals, a kind of magic to guarantee a successful hunt. Some of that may be true, but it doesn't explain everything painted on those walls. Because alongside the animals are hundreds of hand stencils. A person presses their palm to the stone, and someone blows red or black pigment around it, leaving a ghostly negative outline. Archaeologist Genevieve von Petzinger has spent years cataloging these marks across dozens of European caves. She found something the animals alone don't show you. The hands aren't random. Many are missing fingers, or have fingers bent in specific, repeated positions. Von Petzinger's research suggests these might not be injuries. They could be a kind of code, a form of signing, frozen in stone, that we no longer know how to read. Consider what that means. If these hands represent a shared language, a system understood by an entire community, then whoever pressed their palm to that wall wasn't just making art. They were doing something you do constantly without thinking about it. They were saying, I exist. Remember this. Understand me. That impulse is not ancient. It is not something we evolved past. It is the same impulse behind a signature, a social media post, a name carved into a park bench. Here's the part that should genuinely unsettle you. The brain that pressed that hand to the rock was built almost identically to the one inside your skull right now. Same visual cortex. Same capacity for symbolic thought, drive to leave a trace of yourself somewhere permanent. What separates you from that person isn't the hardware. It's 40,000 years of accumulated culture sitting on top of the same basic machine. So, why do these images still affect you? Scrolling through them on a screen in a moment cave artists could never have imagined? Because your brain is pattern matching across an enormous gap in time and recognizing something familiar. The bison isn't just a bison. It's proof that someone once stood exactly where you're standing now, emotionally speaking, trying to make sense of a dangerous, beautiful world, trying to hold on to a moment before it disappeared. Neuroscientist Semir Zeki has argued that art, across every era and culture, taps into the same basic reward circuitry in the brain. Looking at a well-composed image, ancient or modern, regions tied to pleasure and meaning-making, your brain doesn't distinguish much between admiring a Renaissance painting and admiring a 40,000-year-old horse on a cave wall. Both light up something similar, which means the cave itself was never really about the animals. It was, and still is, a mirror. A place where a version of you, dressed differently, speaking a language no longer spoken, stood in flickering torchlight, and tried to answer the same questions you're quietly asking right now. Why am I here? Will anything of me last? Does anyone else feel this too? Every hand stencil is an answer of sorts. A very old, simple answer. Yes, someone else was here. Someone else wondered the same thing. Next time an image stops your thumb mid-scroll, notice what actually happens in that half second. That flicker of recognition, of being reached across an impossible distance, isn't new. It's one of the oldest feelings your species has ever had. So the next time you feel small standing in front of that ancient painted hand, remember this. You're not looking at a fossil of a dead mind. You're looking at a mirror, and the hand on the wall was always waiting for yours.